The night was heavy, the kind of stillness that smothers sound and sharpens every shadow. Inside the dimly lit command post, Maya Carter sat hunched over a desk cluttered with military maps and mission reports, her fingers tracing the edges of a topographic chart. At 32, she was a Special Forces operative, her body lean and coiled like a spring, her dark eyes sharp enough to cut through the haze of war zones she'd navigated from Kandahar to Mogadishu. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow across her uniform, still crisp despite the long hours. Outside, the rhythmic thud of soldiers' boots echoed through the barracks, a reminder of the relentless machinery of war. But Maya's mind was elsewhere, tethered to a place far from the desert sands, a small suburban neighborhood called Pinewood Heights, where her family waited. Her phone vibrated, slicing through the silence like a blade. The screen glowed with her father's name, James Carter. Maya's heart stuttered. It was 2:17 a.m., an hour when calls carried only bad news. She snatched the phone, her voice low but steady. "Dad? What's wrong?" The line crackled and then his voice came, brittle and unfamiliar, stripped of the warmth that had anchored her childhood. "Maya, they've gone too far this time." James's words trembled. Each one weighted with a despair she'd never heard from the man who'd taught her to face the world with grit and grace. "Someone threw a rock through our window tonight. Shattered the glass in the living room. There was a note tied to it, get out or it gets worse." Maya's grip tightened, her knuckles paling against the phone. The room seemed to shrink, the maps and reports blurring into irrelevance. "Are you and Mom okay?" she asked, her voice a controlled whisper, though inside a storm was gathering. "We're fine, just shaken," James said, but the pause that followed betrayed him. "It's not just the rock, Maya. It's everything. The stairs when we walk, Max. The HO notices piling a poor mailbox is too rustic. Our lawns unkempt by half an inch. They're suffocating us piece by piece. Your mother, she's scared to leave the house." Maya's jaw clenched, her mind racing. Pinewood Heights was supposed to be their sanctuary, a slice of the American dream her parents had earned through decades of hard work. James, a retired mechanic, and Lydia, a former nurse, had poured their savings into that modest white house with its creaky porch and rose bushes. They'd chosen Pinewood for its quiet streets and manicured lawns, believing it would be a place to grow old in peace. But now James's voice painted a different picture, a neighborhood where every glance was a judgment, every rule a weapon. "They don't want us here," he continued, his voice cracking. "I tried to believe kindness would win out, that if we kept our heads down they'd accept us. But tonight, Maya, I don't know how much longer we can hold on." The words hit her like shrapnel, each one lodging deep. Maya had faced gunfire, piloted choppers through storms of anti-aircraft fire, and stared down enemies in the dead of night. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield she could map or a threat she could neutralize with a rifle. This was her family, the people who'd raised her to believe in justice, now crumbling under the weight of a hatred that wore the mask of civility. "Dad," she said, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "I'm coming home. Hang on. I'll be there." She ended the call, the silence rushing back like a tide. For a moment she sat motionless, staring at the phone as if it could summon her parents' faces. Then, like a switch flipping, she moved. Her chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to startle a nearby soldier glancing at his tablet. Maya's expression had shifted, gone was the calm operative, replaced by something raw, a fury so controlled it seemed to hum beneath her skin. She strode to the command officer's desk, her boots clicking with purpose, and scribbled a request for emergency leave. Her handwriting was sharp, each letter a vow. 5 minutes later, the form was submitted, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and she was out the door, a shadow slipping into the night. Outside, the stars hung low, their cold light indifferent to the chaos brewing in her heart. Maya paused, her breath visible in the chilly air. She wasn't just leaving the barracks. She was stepping into a fight she hadn't trained for. Pinewood Heights wasn't a war zone with clear enemies and battle lines. It was a place where prejudice hid behind clipped hedges and HOA bylaws, where racism didn't shout but whispered, sharp and insidious. Yet Maya knew one thing with piercing clarity. If she didn't go, if she didn't stand between her family and the forces trying to erase them, no one would. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small rugged case. Inside were tools from her mission's miniature cameras, audio recorders, and encrypted tablet. She hadn't planned to bring them, but instinct had guided her hand. Pinewood Heights might not be a desert, but it was a battlefield, and Maya Carter didn't walk into battle unprepared. As she climbed into the military SUV waiting to take her to the airfield, the low thrum of helicopter blades stirred the air, a distant echo of the war she'd fought. This time, though, the mission was personal. This time she was fighting for home. The flight was a blur. Hours spent staring out the window at clouds lit by moonlight, her mind replaying her father's words. She saw her parents' house in her mind's eye, the worn wooden steps, the American flag flapping proudly on the porch, the garden where her mother spent hours coaxing roses to bloom. She saw her father, his calloused hands fixing neighbors' cars for free, his laugh filling the air at block parties. And she saw her mother, Lydia, whose quiet strength had held the family together through lean years, now afraid to step outside her own door. The images fueled her, each one a spark feeding the fire in her chest. By the time the plane touched down, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in streaks of gold and gray. Maya rented a car and drove straight to Pinewood Heights, the GPS guiding her through familiar streets that now felt foreign. The neighborhood unfolded before her, rows of pristine houses, each lawn trimmed to perfection, American flags dotting every porch like sentinels. It was picture perfect, a postcard of suburban bliss. But as Maya turned onto her parents' street, she felt it. A weight in the air, a silent hostility lurking beneath the polished surface. She pulled into the driveway, her boots crunching on the gravel. The house looked smaller than she remembered, its white paint chipped in places, the rose bushes drooping under the weight of neglect. The living room window was boarded up, a jagged scar where glass should have been. Maya's heart twisted, but she shoved the emotion down, replacing it with focus. She grabbed her duffel and the case of equipment, her eyes scanning the street. A curtain twitched in the house across the way, a shadow retreating behind it. She wasn't alone, and she knew it. James was waiting on the porch, his face lined with exhaustion, his gray hair thinner than she'd last seen. At 58, he carried the weight of a man who'd fought invisible battles for too long. But when he saw Maya, his eyes lit up, a flicker of the father who'd taught her to ride a bike and shoot a BB gun. They hugged, a brief, fierce embrace that said more than words could. "You didn't have to come," he murmured, but his grip told her otherwise. "I did," Maya said simply, stepping back to look at him. "Where's Mom?" "Inside, trying to clean up the glass." James's voice was heavy. "She's been up all night, worrying about what's next." Maya nodded, her jaw tight. "Show me the note." James led her inside, where Lydia was sweeping glass into a dustpan, her movements mechanical. At 55, Lydia was still striking, her dark skin glowing under the morning light, but her eyes were shadowed, her shoulders hunched. When she saw Maya, she dropped the broom and pulled her into a hug, her hands trembling. "Oh baby," she whispered. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "It's my home," Maya said, her voice firm. "And I'm not letting anyone take that from us." James handed her a crumpled piece of paper, the note tied to the rock. The words were scrawled in black marker. "Get out or it gets worse." Maya's blood ran cold, but her face remained a mask. She tucked the note into her pocket, her mind already working. "Have there been others like this?" she asked. "Not this bad," James admitted. "But the HOA's been relentless. Notices for everything. Our fence is too bold. Our dog barks too loud. Last week someone spray-painted 'Go Back' on our mailbox. I painted over it before your mother saw." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Who's leading this?" "The HO." James hesitated, then nodded. "Heather Vaughn. She's the president. Got the whole board in her pocket, and that cop Derek Holt does her dirty work. They act like we're invaders, Maya. Like we don't belong." "We belong," Maya said, her voice low but unyielding. "And I'm going to remind them." She spent the next hour inspecting the house, her training kicking in. She checked the boarded window, noting the angle of the throw, someone standing close, unafraid of being seen. She examined the yard, finding faint footprints in the dirt near the rose bushes, too large for a child. And then she saw it. A tiny glint in the neighbor's hedge across the street. A camera, barely visible, angled directly at their porch. Maya's pulse quickened, but she didn't touch it. Not yet. Evidence was her weapon, and she'd wield it with precision. Inside, she set up her equipment, a motion sensor by the door, a recorder hidden in the living room, her tablet synced to a secure cloud. Lydia watched, her brow furrowed. "What are you planning, Maya?" "To fight," Maya said, her eyes meeting her mother's. "Not with fists but with truth. They think they can scare us out. They're about to learn who they're dealing with." As the sun climbed higher, Pinewood Heights stirred to life. SUVs rolled out of driveways, joggers pounded the sidewalks, sprinklers hissed in perfect rhythm. But Maya felt the undercurrent, the eyes watching from behind curtains, the whispers waiting to strike. She stepped onto the porch, her posture straight, her gaze unflinching. Let them watch. Let them whisper. Maya Carter was home, and she wasn't here to bow. The sun hung high over Pinewood Heights, its glare bouncing off polished SUVs and manicured lawns, turning the neighborhood into a mirror of suburban perfection. But beneath the sheen, tension simmered, sharp and unspoken. Maya Carter stood on her parents' porch, her arms crossed, her dark eyes scanning the street like a hawk. At 32, she carried the quiet intensity of a special forces operative, her body taut, her mind sharper than the knife tucked in her boot. She'd been home less than 24 hours, but the weight of Pinewood's hostility was already pressing against her chest. The boarded-up window behind her, the hateful note in her pocket, and the hidden camera she'd spotted in the neighbor's hedge, they weren't just threats. They were declarations of war. Her parents, James and Lydia, were inside trying to reclaim some normalcy. James was hammering nails into the plywood covering the shattered window, his movements heavy with resignation. Lydia was in the kitchen brewing coffee, her hands trembling as she poured. Maya had promised them she'd handle this, but she knew words alone wouldn't shield them from the venom seeping through Pinewood's pristine facade. She needed evidence, leverage, a way to turn their subtle aggression against them. And she needed it fast. The low purr of an engine broke her thoughts. A white Lexus glided into the driveway, its chrome rims gleaming like a crown. Out stepped Heather Vaughn, the HOA president, her bleached blonde hair teased into a perfect helmet, her navy blazer crisp despite the June heat. At 45, Heather moved with the confidence of someone who'd mastered the art of control, her high heels clicking on the pavement like a metronome of authority. In one hand she clutched a clipboard, its edges worn but pristine, a scepter of her reign over Pinewood Heights. In the other, she held a steaming coffee cup, the kind you'd see in every suburban mom's hand, but Maya knew better. Everything about Heather was calculated, from her pearl earrings to the smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maya's pulse quickened, but her face remained a mask. She'd heard about Heather from her father, how she'd turned the HOA into a weapon, issuing violation notices like bullets, each one aimed at families who didn't fit her vision of Pinewood's harmony. The Carters, with their modest house and Black Lives Matter flag, were her latest target. Maya stepped forward, planting herself at the edge of the porch, her boots firm on the worn wood. Let Heather come. Let her try. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter," Heather chirped, her voice syrupy, the kind of sweetness that cloaked venom. She stopped at the base of the steps, her eyes flicking over Maya's tactical pants and fitted black tee, a faint sneer tugging at her lips. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Just a quick visit to ensure compliance with our community standards." Maya didn't respond, her gaze locked on Heather's. She noted the details: Heather's manicured nails gripping the clipboard, the slight tilt of her head, the way her smile twitched when Maya didn't bow or fidget. Behind Heather, a few neighbors had paused their routines. An older man trimming roses across the street slowed his shears, his eyes darting toward them. A young mother pushing a stroller lingered at the corner, her phone half raised as if to record. Pinewood was watching, and Heather knew it. This wasn't just a visit. It was a performance. "No interruption," Maya said finally, her voice low and even like the calm before a storm. "What's on your list today, Mrs. Vaughn?" Heather's smile tightened, but she pressed on, flipping open her clipboard with a flourish. "Oh, just a few minor issues. Your porch light at 75 watts, not the approved 60. Creates a glare, you see. And the flagpole," she gestured toward the Black Lives Matter flag fluttering beside the American one, her nose wrinkling as if it smelled foul. "It's half an inch too tall. Disrupts the neighborhood's aesthetic balance." Maya's jaw clenched, but she kept her arms crossed, her posture unshaken. "Half an inch. A glare. These weren't violations. They were excuses, flimsy pretexts to harass her family. She saw it in Heather's eyes, the smug certainty that she could wield these rules like a whip, each snap meant to sting, to shame, to drive the Carters out. But Maya wasn't her parents, worn down by months of this. She was a soldier trained to read her enemy, to strike where they least expected. Interesting, Maya said, her tone cool but edged with steel. I'll look into the wattage. Anything else? Heather hesitated, thrown by Maya's calm. She'd expected deference, maybe anger she could twist into a complaint. Instead she got a wall. Her eyes narrowed and she took a step closer, her heels clicking louder. Well, since you're new here, let me clarify, she said, her voice dropping to a patronizing purr. Pinewood Heights values harmony. We welcome diversity, of course, but everyone must respect our standards. Your family's choices like that flag can feel divisive. I'm sure you understand. The air stilled, the word divisive hanging like a guillotine. Maya felt the heat rise in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She knew what Heather meant: your blackness, your pride, your existence. It wasn't the flag Heather hated. It was what it represented. A defiance of her curated, colorless utopia. Maya's hand twitched, itching to reach for the recorder in her pocket, but she held back. Not yet. Timing was everything. Oh, I understand, Maya said, her voice soft but razor-sharp. She took a step down, closing the distance between them, her eyes never leaving Heather's. You want harmony. So do I. That's why I'm here to make sure my family can live in peace. Without rocks through our windows. Without notes telling us to leave. Heather's smile faltered, her coffee cup trembling slightly. She hadn't expected a direct hit, not in front of witnesses. The man with the roses froze, his shears dangling. The mother's phone was now fully raised, capturing every word. Heather recovered quickly, her laugh high and forced. Oh dear, let's not exaggerate. I'm sure it was just kids. No need to make a scene. But Maya wasn't done. She reached into her pocket, not for the recorder, but for her coffee mug, one she'd grabbed from the kitchen. She held it casually, mirroring Heather's stance, but her movements were deliberate, a soldier's precision. Kids don't write notes like that, she said, her voice steady. And they don't install cameras in hedges to spy on us. I saw one across the street, Mrs. Vaughn. Care to explain? The accusation landed like a grenade. Heather's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. The neighbors stirred, whispers rippling through the air. Maya didn't need to look to know they were listening, their perfect world cracking at the edges. Heather opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Maya took another step, her mug tilting just enough to accidentally spill coffee onto Heather's pristine blazer. The dark stain spread like ink, ruining the facade. Oh, I'm so sorry, Maya said, her tone dripping with mock sincerity. Clumsy of me. I guess we both need to be more careful, don't we? Heather's face twisted, her composure shattering. She stepped back, clutching her clipboard like a shield, the coffee dripping onto her shoes. This is unacceptable, she hissed, her voice low but venomous. You'll hear from the board about this. And I suggest you fix those violations before we escalate. Escalate away, Maya said, her smile cold, unyielding. I'm not going anywhere. Heather spun on her heels stabbing the pavement as she stormed back to her Lexus. The neighbors scattered, the man retreating to his roses, the mother hurrying away, her phone still in hand. Maya watched Heather's car peel out, leaving a faint screech in its wake. She set her mug down, her heart pounding but her mind clear. Round one was hers, but she knew Heather wouldn't stop. This was just the opening shot. Inside, James and Lydia had heard everything, their faces a mix of pride and worry. You sure you want to poke that bear? James asked, his hammer resting on the plywood. She's not a bear, Maya said, pulling the recorder from her pocket. She pressed a button and Heather's voice played back, clear and damning. Your family's choices can feel divisive. She's a bully, and bullies crumble when you shine a light on them. Lydia's eyes widened. You recorded her? Every word, Maya said, slipping the device back into her pocket. This is how we fight, Mom. Not with shouts but with proof. But the confrontation wasn't over. As Maya stepped back onto the porch, she noticed a new violation notice taped to the front door. Its edges crisp, the ink still fresh. Fine. $200 for unapproved flag height. She ripped it off, her fingers tightening around the paper. Heather hadn't wasted time. The notice was a jab, a reminder that she still held power. But Maya saw something else, a pattern. She pulled out her tablet, logging the notice alongside the others her parents had received. Mailbox color, lawn length, dog barking. Each one petty, each one a brick in a wall meant to crush them. She scanned the street again, her eyes catching another glint, this time in a tree across the way. Another camera, smaller, better hidden. Her blood ran hot, but she didn't move toward it. Instead, she activated her own equipment, a tiny drone no bigger than a sparrow, one she'd used in covert ops. She sent it skyward, its lens capturing the neighborhood from above. The footage streamed to her tablet, revealing more cameras in fake birdhouses, lenses peeking from mailboxes, a network of eyes watching her family's every move. Maya's breath caught, not from fear but from clarity. This wasn't just Heather's vendetta. It was a system, a silent conspiracy woven into Pinewood's perfect streets. She saved the footage, her mind already mapping the next move. Heather thought she could intimidate her, shame her, drive her out. But Maya Carter wasn't built to break. She was built to fight, and she'd fight with every tool she had: cameras, recordings, and the unyielding will of a soldier who'd come home to protect her own. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Pinewood Heights, Maya stood on the porch, the Black Lives Matter flag rippling in the breeze. She felt the eyes, the whispers, the weight of a neighborhood that wanted her gone. But she also felt something else: a fire, steady and fierce, burning in her core. Heather Vaughn had started this war, but Maya would finish it. And when she did, Pinewood Heights would never be the same. The air in Pinewood Heights carried a deceptive calm, the kind that settles before a storm. Dawn painted the neighborhood in soft pinks and golds, but Maya Carter felt no peace as she laced up her running shoes on the porch. At 32, her body was a weapon, honed by years in special forces, each muscle primed for action. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight braid, her eyes scanning the street with the precision of a predator. The confrontation with Heather Vaughn 2 days ago had drawn first blood. But Maya knew the HOA president wasn't done. Pinewood's hostility was a living thing, coiled and waiting, and today, Maya was ready to test its limits. She stretched, her movements deliberate, her tactical watch synced to a recorder hidden in her waistband. The Black Lives Matter flag still flew beside the faded American one, its bold letters a silent challenge to the neighborhood's polished facade. Her parents, James and Lydia, were inside, their voices low as they debated whether to replace the boarded-up window or wait for Maya's plan to unfold. She'd promised them protection, but protection meant action, not waiting for another rock to shatter their lives. Maya hit the sidewalk, her sneakers pounding a steady rhythm. The streets of Pinewood Heights were waking up. Sprinklers hissed, garage doors rumbled open, joggers nodded politely to one another. But Maya felt the undercurrent, the eyes tracking her from behind curtains, the whispers that followed her like a shadow. She ran past Heather's house, its white columns gleaming, a for sale sign conspicuously absent. Heather wasn't fleeing, she was doubling down. Maya's recorder hummed, capturing the ambient sounds: the chirp of a bird, the hum of a lawnmower, the faint click of a camera shutter from a neighbor's porch. Half a mile in, the air shifted. A low growl cut through the morning quiet, growing louder, closer. Maya's pulse quickened, but she didn't break stride. She knew that sound: a police SUV, its engine tuned for intimidation. It rounded the corner, white and unmarked save for a duct-taped label reading, HOA enforcement. Behind the wheel was Derek Holt, 38, a part-time cop with a badge he wore like a crown. His mirrored sunglasses glinted as he pulled alongside her, matching her pace, the vehicle's tires crunching on the asphalt. Maya kept running, her breath steady, her eyes fixed ahead. She'd heard about Derek from her father, Heather's enforcer, a man who turned authority into a blunt instrument. "Hey girl," Derek called, his voice dripping with contempt, loud enough for joggers across the street to turn. "Slow down. We need to talk." Maya didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge him. She knew the game: belittle, provoke, intimidate. Calling her girl wasn't a slip. It was a jab meant to shrink her, to remind her she didn't belong. She kept her pace, her recorder capturing every word. Derek leaned out the window, his arm resting casually on the door, but his grip on the wheel was tight, his knuckles pale. You deaf? I said stop. She ran on, her heart a steady drum, her mind mapping the terrain. The street was wide, lined with oaks, a few neighbors now pausing to watch Mrs. Ellis watering her azaleas, a teenage boy on a bike. Derek's SUV surged forward, cutting her off, its bumper inches from her legs. He slammed the siren, a single ear-splitting wail that echoed through Pinewood. Maya stopped not because she was scared, but because she wanted him to think he'd won. She turned, her eyes meeting his through those mirrored lenses, her face a mask of calm. Something wrong, Officer Holt? She asked, her voice low, laced with a challenge she knew he'd hear. Derek smirked, stepping out of the SUV, his boots heavy on the pavement. He was tall, broad, his uniform stretched tight across his chest, a holstered Glock at his hip. You're the problem, he said, pointing a finger at her. Stirring up trouble, disrespecting our rules. That flag, those violations, you think you can waltz in here and do whatever you want. Maya stood her ground, her hands loose at her sides, the weight of her concealed 9mm holstered at her lower back a quiet reassurance. She was licensed, trained and unafraid, but she wouldn't draw unless forced. I'm just running, she said, her tone even. Last I checked, that's not against your rules. His smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. He stepped closer, close enough for her to smell his cologne, sharp and cheap. You're not fooling anyone, he hissed. People like you bring trouble. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure you regret it. His hand hovered near his holster, a silent threat, but Maya didn't blink. She tilted her head, her eyes dissecting him, his tense jaw, his shallow breaths, the way his fingers twitched. He was angry, but he was also nervous. Good. Thanks for the advice, she said, her voice cold, deliberate. But I'm not the one breaking laws. Intimidation's a crime, officer. So is stalking. You might want to check your manual. Derek's face darkened, a vein pulsing at his temple. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a car honked nearby, breaking the spell. Mrs. Ellis was watching, her hose now dangling, water pooling on her lawn. The teenage boy had his phone out, recording. Derek glanced around, his bravado faltering under the weight of witnesses. He muttered something under his breath, climbed back into his SUV, and gunned the engine, peeling away with a screech that left tire marks on the road. Maya exhaled, her heart pounding but her resolve ironclad. She pressed a button on her watch, stopping the recorder. Derek's words, people like you bring trouble, were now hers, a weapon to wield when the time came. She resumed her run, slower now, her mind racing. Derek wasn't just Heather's muscle. He was a symptom of Pinewood's rot, a man who saw his badge as a license to bully. But bullies, Maya knew, always overplayed their hand. Back at the house, she found James on the porch, his face tight with worry. Saw that cop car, he said, his voice low. What happened? Maya pulled her tablet from her bag, syncing the recorder's audio. Derek Holt happened, she said, playing the clip. James's eyes widened as Derek's voice filled the air, raw and hateful. He's not just enforcing rules, Dad. He's trying to scare us out. Lydia appeared at the door, her apron dusted with flour from baking, her eyes shadowed. Maya, you can't keep baiting them. That man's dangerous. I'm not baiting, Maya said, her voice firm but gentle. I'm exposing. They think they can hide behind badges and clipboards. I'm going to make sure they can't. But the morning's clash was only the beginning. By noon, a new violation notice was taped to the door. $150 fine for excessive noise, dog barking. Maya's jaw tightened. Max, their old golden retriever, had been inside all morning, quiet as a shadow. She checked her motion sensor logs, nothing but Derek's SUV passing by at 7:43 a.m. The notice was a lie, another jab in Heather's campaign. Maya added it to her growing file, her fingers itching to act. That afternoon she took Max for a walk, her drone buzzing discreetly overhead, capturing the neighborhood's secrets. She spotted more cameras, one in a fake rock near the park, another in a mailbox slot. But it was the man across the street who caught her attention. Mr. Thompson, a retired accountant, was adjusting a bird feeder, his eyes darting toward her. When Max sniffed a bush, Thompson raised his phone, snapping photos. Maya's blood boiled, but she smiled, waving as if nothing was wrong. Let him think she was clueless. Let them all. Back home, she reviewed the drone footage, her heart sinking. The cameras weren't random. They formed a grid, a surveillance net centered on her parents' house. She cross-referenced the violation notices, finding a pattern. Every fine coincided with the camera's line of sight. Heather and Derek weren't just watching. They were orchestrating, building a case to justify their harassment. Maya saved the footage, her mind spinning with plans. She needed allies, witnesses, someone to break Pinewood's silence. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Maya sat on the porch, Max at her feet, the flag rippling above. A shadow moved across the street. Henry Liu, the retired engineer from number 47, his khaki jacket blending into the dusk. He nodded, a subtle gesture, but his eyes held something new, resolve. Maya nodded back, a silent pact forming. She wasn't alone, not entirely. Derek's threats had raised the stakes, but they'd also lit a spark. Pinewood Heights was a battlefield, and Maya was ready to turn their weapons against them. One recorded word, one captured image at a time. The moon hung low over Pinewood Heights, its pale light casting long, jagged shadows across the neighborhood's flawless lawns. Maya Carter sat in the darkened living room, the glow of her tablet the only illumination, her eyes fixed on a grainy video feed. At 32, she was a special forces operative, trained to see through chaos, to find the threads that tied enemies together. But here, in the quiet of her parents' home, she was unraveling a different kind of threat, one that didn't wear a uniform or carry a rifle, but hid behind cameras and clipboards, its venom cloaked in suburban civility. The confrontation with Derek Holt had lit a fire in her, and the violation notices piling up were fuel. Tonight she was hunting. Her tablet displayed footage from her covert drone, a sparrow-sized device that had mapped Pinewood's secrets over the past 2 days. The screen showed a web of cameras, some in fake birdhouses, others tucked into mailboxes or disguised as porch lights, all angled toward her family's modest White House. Maya's jaw tightened as she traced the pattern, her finger hovering over a new discovery. A blinking red light in the alley behind their backyard, hidden in a trash bin. Not a camera, but something War-C listening device, its signal faint but active. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with the cold clarity of a soldier who just found the enemy's flank. She leaned back, her mind racing. The cameras were bad enough, but a bug meant Pinewood surveillance wasn't just visual, it was invasive, personal, designed to catch every word spoken in their home. Maya's parents, James and Lydia, were asleep upstairs, unaware of the invisible noose tightening around them. She'd promised to protect them, but protection meant dismantling this network, exposing its architects. Heather Vaughn and Derek Holt were the faces of Pinewood's hostility, but Maya suspected a broader conspiracy, a neighborhood complicit in silence. She slipped on a black hoodie, her movements silent, practiced. Her 9mm was holstered at her lower back, a legal precaution she hoped not to use. In her pocket, she carried a multi-tool and a signal jammer, relics from missions in hostile territories. The alley was her target, a narrow strip of gravel and weeds, lined with trash bins and fences, where Pinewood's perfection gave way to grit. She stepped outside, the night air cool against her skin, the Black Lives Matter flag rippling above like a sentinel. Max, their old golden retriever, stirred at the door, but Maya whispered, "Stay, boy." This was her fight. The alley was dark, the streetlights barely reaching its edges. Maya moved like a shadow, her boots silent on the gravel. She crouched beside the trash bin, her flashlight's beam catching the glint of a small black device taped to the underside of the lid. It was crude, a cheap mic wired to a transmitter, but effective. Her fingers worked quickly, the multi-tool prying it free. The device buzzed faintly, still live. She activated her jammer, killing the signal, and slipped the bug into a Faraday pouch. Evidence, she thought, her pulse steady but fierce. As she stood, a rustle came from the shadows. Maya froze, her hand hovering near her holster. A figure emerged, Mr. Thompson, the accountant from across the street, his gray hair disheveled, a flashlight shaking in his hand. At 60, he was no threat, but his presence here at 1 a.m. was no coincidence. His eyes widened when he saw Maya, the bug pouch in her hand. "What are you doing?" he stammered, his voice high with panic. Maya stepped forward, her flashlight pinning him in its beam. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing," she said, her voice low, edged with steel. "Planting more of these?" She held up the pouch, watching his face pale. Two don't know what that is, Thompson lied, his eyes darting toward the alley's exit. But Maya was faster, sidestepping to block his path. She didn't touch him, didn't need to. Her presence, calm, unyielding, was enough. Don't, she said, her tone a warning. I've got cameras of my own. Drones too. I know you've been watching us, snapping photos when Max barks, reporting to Heather. The question is, why? Thompson's shoulders slumped, his flashlight drooping. It's not personal, he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Heather pays me $50 a month to keep an eye on certain houses. She said it was for safety, to keep the neighborhood pure. Pure, Maya repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. You mean white? He flinched but didn't deny it. Maya's recorder was running, hidden in her sleeve, capturing every word. She leaned closer, her voice soft but cutting. You're not just a bystander, Mr. Thompson. You're part of this. But you can still choose a side. Tell me who else is involved or I take this to the police. Your call. Thompson's hands trembled, his breath ragged. It's not just me, he whispered. Half the block's in on it. Cameras, reports, fines. Heather's got a group chat, her, Derek, a few others. They call it Pinewood Pride. They plan everything there, violations, patrols, how to make you leave. Maya's blood ran hot, but her face stayed cold. A group chat. A digital trail. She'd been right, this wasn't just Heather and Derek. It was a system, a neighborhood weaponized against her family. Give me names, she said, her voice unyielding. He hesitated, then rattled off a list. Mrs. Ellis, the florist, the Patel's neighbor, a lawyer named Gregson, even the teenage boy who'd filmed her run-in with Derek. Maya memorized each one, her mind already mapping the network. Thompson tried to back away, but tripped over a trash bin, sending cans clattering across the gravel. The noise echoed, lights flicking on in nearby houses. Maya didn't wait. She vanished into the shadows, the bug pouch secure. Thompson's confession recorded. Back home she locked the door. Her heart pounding but her resolve ironclad. She uploaded the audio to her encrypted cloud, cross-referencing Thompson's names with her drone footage. The tablet screen glowed, revealing more cameras, more bugs. A web so tight it choked her family's every move. She found the group chat Thompson mentioned, not through hacking, but through a careless email Heather had forwarded to her father, buried in a violation notice. One screenshot showed Pinewood Pride in action. Carter's flag is still up. Derek, can you handle it? The reply on it. They'll learn. Maya's fingers trembled, not from fear but from fury. This wasn't just surveillance. It was warfare, psychological and relentless. She checked her motion sensors. Derek's SUV had circled their street twice that night, his headlights lingering on their porch. She added the footage to her file, her evidence growing like a storm cloud. The next morning she faced her parents, their faces etched with worry. James was repairing the mailbox, its fresh paint covering the faded "Go Back" graffiti. Lydia was pruning roses, her hands shaking as she glanced at neighbors' windows. Maya showed them the bug, the footage, Thompson's confession. They're not just watching, she said, her voice steady. They're listening, planning, trying to break us. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. Why us, Maya? We just wanted a home. Because we're here, Maya said, her hand on her mother's. Because we're black, proud, and not bowing down. That's what scares them. James set down his paintbrush, his voice low. What's your plan, baby girl? Maya pulled up her tablet, showing the web of cameras, the chat screenshots, the audio files. We exposed them, she said. Not with fights but with proof. I'm building a case, every camera, every word, every lie. But I need help. There's a man, Henry Liu, across the street. He nodded to me last night. I think he's ready to talk. James nodded, his eyes hardening. Then talk to him. But be careful, Maya. These people, they're not playing. I'm not playing either, she said, her smile cold, determined. She stepped outside, her drone buzzing overhead, capturing Pinewood's secrets. Across the street, Henry Liu was mowing his lawn, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment. Another nod, another crack in Pinewood's armor. Maya's heart surged. The network was real, but so was her fight. Heather and Derek thought they could trap her family. They were about to learn how a soldier turns a trap into a weapon. The late afternoon sun burned low over Pinewood Heights, its golden rays slicing through the oaks, casting dappled shadows on the Carters' weathered porch. Maya Carter stood at the edge of the steps, her arms loose, her dark eyes locked on the street. At 32, she was a Special Forces operative, her body a coiled spring, her mind a blade honed by years of navigating war zones. But here, in the heart of this suburban battlefield, the stakes felt higher than any mission she'd faced. The Black Lives Matter flag fluttered above, its bold letters a defiant beacon against the neighborhood's pristine facade. Maya's recorder was on, her 9mm holstered legally at her lower back, her resolve forged in the fire of the past week's Discovery's surveillance network, a hateful group chat, and a neighborhood complicit in trying to erase her family. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of cut grass and the distant hum of sprinklers. Her parents, James and Lydia, were inside, their voices muted as they sorted through another violation notice. $250 for unapproved porch furniture. Maya had added it to her growing file: audio confessions, drone footage, screenshots of Pinewood Pride, plotting her family's expulsion. She'd confronted Mr. Thompson, exposed his role in Heather Vaughn's scheme, and secured a tentative ally in Henry Liu, the quiet neighbor who'd nodded from across the street. But the real fight was coming, and Maya felt it in her bones, a storm gathering on the horizon. The roar of an engine shattered the calm. A white SUV screeched to a stop at the curb, its duct-taped HOA enforcement, label glinting in the fading light. Derek Holt stepped out, his police uniform crisp, his badge a gleaming taunt. At 38, he was broad and imposing, his mirrored sunglasses hiding eyes Maya knew burned with contempt. His hand rested on his holstered Glock, a deliberate signal. Behind him, Heather Vaughn's Lexus idled across the street, her silhouette visible through tinted windows. The neighbors stirred, curtains twitched, phones appeared, a crowd forming like vultures sensing blood. Pinewood Heights was a stage, and Derek was ready to perform. "Carter!" Derek bellowed, his voice echoing down the street. "Take that damn flag down. It's against community standards, inciting division. You've been warned." Maya didn't move, her boots rooted to the porch, her face a mask of calm. She'd faced men like Derek before, bullies who mistook power for strength. Her recorder hummed, capturing every word, every threat. "That flag stays," she said, her voice low, unyielding. "It's on private property, and it's my right. You know that, Officer Holt." Derek's jaw clenched, his hand tightening on his holster. He stomped up the walkway, his boots heavy, each step a challenge. "You think you're smart, girl?" he snarled, stopping just feet from her, close enough for her to smell his sweat. "You don't belong here. Keep pushing, and I'll show you what happens to troublemakers." Maya's pulse thrummed, but her training held her steady. She noted the details: Derek's trembling fingers, the sweat beading on his brow, the way his eyes flicked toward the growing crowd. He was angry, but he was also cornered, his bravado a thin veneer. She tilted her head, her voice cutting through the tension. "Troublemakers? You mean people who live here, pay taxes, and fly flags you don't like? Sounds like you're the one stirring trouble." The crowd murmured, phones raised, filming. Derek's face reddened, his control slipping. He ripped a violation notice from his clipboard, thrusting it at her. $500 fine for flag violation. "And I'm not done." He pointed at the porch. "That chair's unapproved. That light's too bright. You're racking up penalties, Carter. Keep it up and you'll lose this house." Maya took the notice, her eyes never leaving his. "You're good at writing tickets," she said, her tone laced with mockery. "But you're not good at hiding. I've got your voice on tape, your car on camera, your chats with Heather planning to handle us. You're not enforcing rules. You're breaking laws." Derek froze, his sunglasses slipping down his nose, revealing eyes wide with rage and something else, fear. He stepped closer, his voice a hiss. "You think you can scare me with your little recordings? This is my town. You're nothing here." His hand shot to his holster, and in one fluid motion, he drew his Glock, the barrel leveling at Maya's chest. Time slowed. Max barked wildly from inside, his claws scratching at the door. A scream rang out, Mrs. Ellis clutching her hose, her face pale. The crowd gasped, phones shaking as they filmed. Maya's heart pounded, but her training kicked in, her body still, her mind a razor. She saw Derek's finger on the trigger, his stance unsteady, his breath ragged. He wasn't just threatening, was unraveling. Put it down, Maya said, her voice steady, commanding. You don't want this. Derek laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You don't tell me what to do. He raised the gun skyward and fired, a single shot cracking through the air, the sound ricocheting off Pinewood's perfect houses. The crowd screamed, some ducking, others running. Maya didn't flinch. In one smooth motion, she reached behind her, drawing her 9mm, her grip firm, her aim steady but not raised. She held it low, a warning, her eyes locked on Derek's. Drop it, Holt, she said, her voice ablaze. I'm licensed, trained, and not afraid. You fired a shot in a residential street. That's reckless endangerment. Step back or you're done. Derek's gun wavered, his face a storm of disbelief. He hadn't expected resistance, not like this. Maya pulled a folded paper from her jacket, its red seal gleaming. Emergency protective order, she said, her voice ringing clear. County court signed yesterday. You're prohibited from coming within 100 feet of me or my family. You're in violation. Right now. The wail of sirens cut through the chaos, red and blue lights flashing as two patrol cars sped into view. Derek's eyes darted to them, his gun still raised, his bravado crumbling. Maya held her ground, her 9mm steady, her recorder capturing every second. The crowd was a sea of phones now, neighbors filming, whispering, some shouting for Derek to stop. Heather's Lexus peeled away, abandoning her enforcer. The patrol cars screeched to a halt, doors flying open. Two officers emerged, their hands on their holsters, their voices sharp. Derek Holt, one shouted, a woman with a no-nonsense glare. Lower your weapon. You're under arrest for violating a protective order and brandishing a firearm with intent to intimidate. Derek's gun dropped, clattering to the pavement. He raised his hands, his face twisted with fury and defeat. This is bullshit, he roared, but the officers were on him, yanking his arms behind his back, the metallic clink of handcuffs silencing his protests. Maya holstered her weapon, her breath steady, her eyes never leaving Derek as he was shoved into the squad car. The crowd watched, stunned, their phones still rolling, the footage already spreading like wildfire. James burst onto the porch, his face pale, Lydia behind him, her hands clasped in prayer. Maya! James called, his voice raw. You okay? I'm fine, Maya said, turning to them, her voice calm but firm. She held up the protective order, its paper creased but powerful. He's done, Dad. For now. The squad cars pulled away. Derek's SUV left abandoned at the curb, a relic of his fallen power. Neighbors crept closer, some filming, others whispering, their faces a mix of shock and shame. Mrs. Ellis dropped her hose, water pooling at her feet. The teenage boy who'd filmed Maya's run-in with Derek was grinning, his phone still raised. Maya nodded to him, a silent thank you. The tide was turning. Inside, Maya sank into a chair, her adrenaline fading, her hands steady but her heart racing. She played back the recorder, Derek's voice booming. You're nothing here. She saved the file, adding it to her evidence, Thompson's confession, the group chat, the drone footage. Lydia brought her a glass of water, her eyes wet. You could have been killed, she whispered. But I wasn't, Maya said, squeezing her mother's hand. I'm trained for this, Mom. And I'm not fighting alone anymore. James sat across from her, his face grim. What's next? Heather's still out there. She won't stop. Maya pulled up her tablet, showing a new email from Henry Leo, a grainy photo of Heather meeting Derek in a parking lot, passing him an envelope. Henry's with us, she said. And others will follow. Derek's arrest is just the start. Heather's next. Outside, Pinewood Heights was quiet, but it was the quiet of a held breath, a neighborhood on the edge. Maya's drone buzzed overhead, capturing the crowd dispersing, the abandoned SUV, the flag still flying. She leaned back, her eyes on the ceiling, her mind already planning. Derek had drawn a gun, fired a shot, but he'd also handed her a victory. The footage was viral, the protective order ironclad, and Pinewood's facade was cracking. Maya Carter wasn't just surviving, she was winning, one recorded threat, one bold stand at a time. The dusk over Pinewood Heights was heavy, the sky bruised with clouds that seemed to press down on the neighborhood's perfect rooftops. Maya Carter stood in her parents' living room, her tablet glowing with evidence that felt like a ticking bomb. Audio confessions, drone footage, violation notices, and now the viral video of Derek Holt's arrest, his gun raised against her, his shot echoing through the streets. At 32, Maya was a special forces operative, her dark eyes sharp with purpose, her body taut with the weight of a fight that had become more than persona lit was a reckoning. The Black Lives Matter flag still flew on the porch, a silent vow that the Carters would not be erased. Derek's arrest had cracked Pinewood's facade, but Heather Vaughn, the HOA president, remained its architect. At 45, Heather was a master of control, her bleached blonde hair and tailored blazers a mask for the venom she wielded through bylaws and fines. Maya knew Heather wouldn't retreat, strike harder, cloaking her prejudice in the language of community standards. But Maya was ready, her evidence a blade honed to cut through lies. Tonight Pinewood would see Heather's true face, and Maya would be the one to unveil it. The day began with a chime, a new email notification that sliced through the morning quiet. Maya sat at the kitchen table, James and Lydia across from her, their faces etched with cautious hope. The email was from Heather, marked Emergency HOA Communication, its bold subject line a warning. Maya's pulse quickened as she opened it, her eyes skimming the text. The message was meant for the HOA board, a select few loyal to Heather's vision, but in her panic after Derek's arrest, she'd misclicked, CCing every resident in Pinewood Heights. The words were raw, unfiltered, a tirade that stripped away her polished veneer. If we let those people continue to challenge our rules, Pinewood will be a garbage dump by summer. The Carters and their kind don't belong here. We need to shut down this fake equal rights nonsense before it destroys our community. I'm not sorry for saying this is about race, about preserving the order we built. Maya's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the tablet. The email was a confession, a noose Heather had tied herself. She leaned back, letting the words sink in, their weight both bitter and triumphant. James set down his coffee, his hands trembling, not with fear, but with a deep aching relief. Lydia's eyes glistened, her voice soft. She said it. Out loud. She did, Maya said, turning the screen so they could read. And now everyone knows. Across the street in Heather's gray-roofed mansion, chaos was unfolding. Maya imagined her scrambling at her computer, her manicured nails smashing keys, trying to recall the email. But the system's cold reply recall failed. Message already open would have hit like a sledgehammer. Heather's empire built on whispers and clipboards was unraveling, not from Maya's hands, but from her own arrogance. Maya saved the email, adding it to her file. Thompson's confession, Derek's recorded threats, the Pinewood Pride chat plotting her family's expulsion, and now Heather's own words, a guillotine dropped on her reign. The news spread like wildfire. By noon, Pinewood's group chats buzzed, neighbors forwarding the email, some with outrage, others with shame. Maya's phone pinged with a message from Henry Liu, the retired engineer who'd become her ally. People are talking. They're angry. Meeting tonight at the community hall. Be there. Maya nodded to herself, her mind already mapping the battlefield. The hall, usually a stage for Heather's decrees, would tonight be her undoing. As evening fell, Pinewood Heights pulsed with tension. Maya walked to the community hall, her thick file tucked under her arm, her recorder in her pocket, her parents at her side. James, 58, walked taller, his shoulders squared, the weight of months lifting. Lydia, 55, clutched Maya's hand, her eyes fierce with pride. Behind them followed Henry Liu, the Patel family, and Elena Morales, a Latina single mother who'd faced Heather's fines for her son's skateboard. The crowd grew, neighbors joining hesitantly, their faces a mix of curiosity and guilt. Pinewood was waking up, and Maya was its spark. The hall was packed, white plastic chairs squeezed together, the air thick with whispers and the hum of fluorescent lights. Heather sat at the chairman's table, her face pale, her makeup failing to hide the panic in her eyes. She wore a navy suit, her hair perfect, but her hands betrayed her, twisting a pen until it snapped. The crowd watched, their loyalty to her fraying, their phones buzzing with the email that had shattered her myth. Maya stepped to the microphone, her boots clicking on the hardwood floor. The room stilled, all eyes on her. She didn't smile, didn't soften her presence. At 5 feet 6 inches, she was a force, her tactical calm a contrast to Heather's brittle facade. I'm not here to argue, she began, her voice steady, each word a hammer. I'm here to show you the truth. She connected her tablet to the projector, the screen flaring to life. The first video played Derek Holt on her porch, gun raised, his voice snarling. "You're nothing here." Gasps rippled through the crowd, some covering their mouths, others dropping their heads. Next came Thompson's audio confession, admitting Heather paid him to spy. Then the Pinewood Pride chat messages flashing. "Carter's flag is still up. Derek, handle it." And finally Heather's email. Its words projected in stark black and white, undeniable. The hall grew heavy, the silence suffocating. Maya paused, letting the truth settle, then revealed her final slide. Echo financial records, downloaded from a tip Henry had provided. The numbers were damning. $50,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, funneled to Heather's personal account, labeled as consulting fees. Maya pointed to the screen, her voice cutting through the haze. "This isn't just prejudice. It's theft. Heather didn't just target my family, she betrayed all of you." Henry Lou stood, his voice firm. "I've lived here 20 years. I've seen families like the Patels, the Morales pushed out. Heather rigged elections, silenced dissent. We trusted her, and she used us." Elena Morales rose, her eyes blazing. "My son was fined for skating, but white kids weren't. Heather called us disruptive. She's the disruption." The crowd stirred, murmurs growing to shouts. An elderly woman, Mrs. Grayson, stood, tears streaming down her face. "I signed her petitions," she choked. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Heather lurched to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is a witch hunt," she cried, her hands shaking. "These are lies, fabrications. I've kept Pinewood perfect." Maya met her gaze, unflinching. "Perfect for who, Heather? Not for us. Not for anyone who didn't fit your mold." She played one last recording, Derek in a jailhouse interview, his voice broken. "Heather told me to scare them. The fines, the cameras, it was all her." The room erupted, applause mixing with boos. Heather sank into her chair, her face crumpling, her pen rolling to the floor. The chairman, a quiet man who'd long deferred to her, stood. "Mrs. Vaughn, based on this evidence, you're removed as HOA president. Criminal charges for embezzlement and discrimination will be forwarded to the DA." Heather's sob was drowned by the crowd's roar. She stumbled from the table, her clipboard clattering to the ground, a hollow echo of her fallen power. Neighbors parted as she fled, some turning away, others staring, their betrayal raw. Maya watched, not with triumph, but with the calm certainty of a soldier who'd won a battle but knew the war wasn't over. Outside, the crowd spilled onto the lawn, phones flashing as reporters arrived, drawn by the viral video. Maya stayed back, letting Henry and Elena speak, their voices carrying the weight of years silenced. She returned home, her file lighter, her heart heavy but resolute. The next day, Heather's house was listed for sale, her Lexus gone. But Maya knew the wound she'd left wouldn't heal overnight. Pinewood needed rebuilding, and Maya's fight had lit the way. Spring arrived in Pinewood Heights like a quiet promise, the air soft with the scent of blooming roses and fresh-cut grass. The neighborhood, once a fortress of rigid conformity, was shedding its old skin, its streets alive with color and laughter. Maya Carter sat on her parents' porch, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands, her dark eyes tracing the changes she'd fought for. At 32, she was a special forces operative, her body still coiled with the strength of a soldier, but her heart carried a new lightness. The Black Lives Matter flag fluttered beside the faded American one. No longer a target, but a symbol of a battle won. Pinewood Heights was no longer Heather Vaughn's domain, it was a community reborn. And Maya had been its spark. The weeks following Heather's downfall had been a whirlwind. Her email exposing her raw prejudice had shattered Pinewood's silence, and Derek Holt's arrest, his gun raised against Maya, his shot echoing through viral footage, had sealed her fate. The HOA meeting, where Maya presented her damning evidence, had stripped Heather of her presidency, her embezzlement charges sending her fleeing to a courtroom that offered no mercy. Pinewood's residents, once complicit in their silence, had faced a reckoning, their shame giving way to action. The HOA was rebuilt, its elections open, its rules rewritten to embrace diversity rather than choke it. Maya had declined to lead, her mission not to rule but to restore, to open a door and step aside. Now as the sun climbed higher, Pinewood Heights bloomed. Houses once painted in mandatory beiges and grays now burst with yellows, blues, and reds, each a quiet rebellion against Heather's sterile vision. Children scribbled chalk drawings on sidewalks, hearts, rainbows, names in looping script while families gathered on lawns, their laughter mingling with the chirp of sparrows. The Patel family, once fined for their Diwali lights, had returned, their home aglow with lanterns. Elena Morales, the Latina single mother, no longer hit her son's skateboard, its wheels clattering proudly down the street. New families arrived, Black, Asian, immigrant-filling homes left vacant by fear, their presence a testament to Pinewood's transformation. Maya leaned back in her chair, the porch creaking beneath her. Across the yard, James, 58, tended his bird feeder, its wooden frame a labor of love, now drawing robins and finches that darted in the morning light. At 55, Lydia knitted beside him, her needles clicking, her smile soft but unburdened. The violation notices, once a daily assault, were gone, replaced by neighborly waves and invitations to barbecues. Pinewood Heights wasn't perfect, wounds lingered in wary glances, in apologies yet to be spoken, but it was healing, its heart beating with a shared hope Maya had fought to ignite. She sipped her coffee, her eyes catching a group of kids on bikes, their laughter echoing. One, a girl with braids, waved at her, her chalk-stained hands clutching handlebars. Maya waved back, a warmth spreading in her chest. This was why she'd fought, not just for her family, but for every child who deserved to grow up without fear, every family who claimed their place without permission. The memory of Heather's clipboard, Derek's gun, the cameras hidden in hedges, felt distant now, like echoes of a storm that had passed. But the fight hadn't ended with Heather's defeat. Maya had organized a community event, a film screening in the park, projecting documentaries on racial justice, the footage of Derek's arrest interwoven with stories of resilience. Neighbors had come, some hesitant, others eager, their folding chairs spread across the grass. Maya had spoken briefly, her voice steady. This isn't about blame. It's about building. The event drew local reporters, their cameras capturing kids drawing murals with messages like unity and home. The murals stayed, a permanent mark of Pinewood's new dawn. As noon approached, James set down his tools, wiping sweat from his brow. You did this, Maya, he said, his voice thick with pride. You brought us back. Maya shook her head, her smile soft. We did this, Dad. All of us. Lydia looked up from her knitting, her eyes glistening. You're leaving soon, aren't you? Maya nodded, her gaze drifting to the horizon. I've requested redeployment. My unit's waiting. But I'm going knowing you're safe, that this is home. That evening, the Carters sat around the dinner table, the air warm with the scent of Lydia's cornbread and James's grilled chicken. Maya shared her decision to return to Special Forces, her voice calm but bright. I can go now, she said, meeting their eyes. Because Pinewood's not just a place anymore. It's ours. James squeezed her hand, his callous fingers steady. You're a fighter, baby girl. Always have been. Lydia smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. And you'll come back to us. Always, Maya said, her heart full. The next morning, she packed her duffel, her movements deliberate, her uniform folded with care. She stepped onto the porch, the bird feeder swinging gently, its music of wings a quiet farewell. Pinewood Heights stretched before her, vibrant and flawed, its streets alive with dogs chasing balls, kids on scooters, neighbors chatting over fences. The flag still flew, its message unchallenged, a reminder that freedom wasn't given, it was claimed. As she climbed into the rental car bound for the airport, Maya turned for one last look. A lark burst from the oak tree, its song piercing the morning sky. She smiled, the sound lingering as she drove away. Pinewood Heights had found its dawn, not through miracles, but through the stubborn courage of those who refused to bow. Maya Carter had stood firm, and in doing so she'd saved a community not by shouting, but by lighting a path for others to follow. The sun sets on Pinewood Heights, and Maya Carter's story fades into the golden glow. But let's hit pause before you scroll away. This isn't just a tale of one woman kicking HOA, but with Special Forces swagger. It's a mirror held up to our world, right here, right now in 2025. Think about it. Maya faced a neighborhood that smiled while stabbing, where clipboards were weapons and cameras played Big Brother. Sound familiar? Maybe it's not an HOA in your life, but a snarky coworker, a shady algorithm, or that one neighbor who side-eyes your lawn gnomes. We've all met a Heather Vaughn, hiding her control freak vibes behind a latte and a fake laugh. And let's be real, didn't we all wish we had Maya's cool-headed takedown skills when dealing with our own Derek Holtz? Here's the lesson served with a wink. Courage isn't always about guns or viral videos. Sometimes it's standing up to the little injustices, the snide comment, the unfair rule, the you don't belong vibe, armed with nothing but truth and a good recorder. Maya didn't just fight for her family. She showed us that change starts when one person says, enough. In a world where X posts can spark revolutions and TikToks can topple egos, we've got more power than ever to call out nonsense. So next time you see a Heather waving her clipboard, channel your inner Maya. Record, rally, rebuild. And maybe spill some coffee for dramatic effect, just don't quote me in court. But let's get serious for a sec. Maya's story reminds us that communities thrive on respect, not sameness. In 2025, we're still wrestling with division, race, politics, even who gets to put flamingos in their yard. Pinewood Heights became a home when its people chose to listen, to heal, to let kids draw chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. That's the America we're building, one bold stand at a time. So what's your Pinewood Heights? Where's the fight you're itching to take on? Drop a comment below, tell us about your own Heather, or how you'd rewrite your neighborhood's rulebook. We're all ears. Oh, and before you vanish into the internet abyss, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Our channel's packed with stories of grit, heart, and the occasional coffee spilling hero. Join the crew and let's keep the courage flowing. What's the next battle you want us to tackle? Hit us up, and let's make some noise together.